Okay, now we begin the proper presentation. I will start by saying, friends, Romans, countrymen. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist this. I've been waiting all my life to be able to do this in Rome. Lend me your ears. The future, the theme is the future. It is a very relative term, one that changes constantly. In the 50s, the future was George Orwell's 1984, so 30 years' time. In the 70s, it was 2001 Space Odyssey. Now we're looking at the future, could be 5, could be 10 years. And the concept could be anything from alien invasion, dictators with funny hairstyles, or robotarchies. Robotarchy 2030 could be a good movie. So it is a little ironic that we find ourselves in Rome, which is called the Eternal City, which is a bit of a misnomer. It's comforting, reassuring, but unfortunately not true. Nothing is eternal. And why, paradoxically, in my case, with more past than future, I am fascinated by the speed with which the future is unfolding, and painfully aware that time traveling will not be available to me, at least. I feel that I owe it to my position as president of ACE and somehow guiding or steering, trying to steer this profession in Europe, is to try and understand and read into the future so we can be prepared. As like some benign wizard, I will look into the crystal ball and try and understand how and where the profession should be going. This is because I believe from experience that our profession, if we look at it compared to other industries and other professions, the technology of the construction technology and the building trade has lagged far behind other fields. I think, I had a video that demonstrates what we could be looking forward to. But society is changing, and the way society looks at architects is changing. So our role is changing. 65% of today's school children will eventually be employed in jobs that today do not exist. This is according to the US Department of Labor Statistics report. Just as manufacturing saw a shift in the last 30 years from 80% unskilled jobs to 12% today. The next decade will see an even more falling off of unskilled labor. So we know that we no longer have shorthand typists, we no longer have milkmen, bus conductors, switchboard operators, all these archaic terms that in a very few years have just disappeared. But what concerns me more is what will architects be? In my darker moments, sometimes I'm convinced that perhaps we will not be architects anymore, but certainly we will not be architects as we are today. That is why I conceived this day, this symposium. That's why I brought you all here, because I don't want to be alone in this. I need your help. I need to hear from everybody involved in the process what we can expect. We are in this together. We have established a strong relationship with the EAE over the last few years, because I really believe that we need to start working with the schools in a very concrete way. We cannot separate formation from practice and from research. Being an architect is a lifelong commitment. I know I may sound repetitive, but I've said this time and time again. It cannot be divided into compartments. It is an ongoing process, and it goes forward and it goes backwards. So when you go research-based practice is something which is happening and which is exciting. CPD somehow brings us back and connects us to the learning curve and makes us feel like students again and gives us an insight into what people in the schools today are experiencing. So I think it's a very positive effect. So the schools, you the professors, have the time to think, what we like to believe you do, but it is certainly your job to observe and to reflect. We are caught up in this milieu of trying to work and trying to battle with bureaucracy. I know you all have your own bureaucracies as well, probably more than us. But let's try and just think that you are in your offices thinking, and we are sort of now working with the nitty-gritty of legislation, of bureaucracy and construction. So we need you to tell us from your experience what is happening, and from our experience we can reflect back to what we feel is shaping our future. So let's say you have the freedom, let's pretend you have the freedom and we have the constraints. This is more or less sums up the first 2 sessions of this morning's event, which is divided into 3 or 4 speakers in each. short interventions, and then we've allowed 40 minutes or so for debate and discussion, where I would really like to hear an interaction with the public. So we will try and stimulate this. I will ask the moderators to stimulate the public as well as the people sitting on the podium to actually be involved in the discussion. So the first one, if we call it freedom, it would be integrated strategies, where I would like to hear about innovation in education, lateral thinking, radical pedagogies, alternative facts, whatever we call it. I want to hear about new ways and new thoughts on education. What is happening in the field of learning? Is it enough? Should we be doing something else? The second would be constraint, and we're talking about more boring stuff like regulation. Deregulation is something the EU legislation has been trying to cram down our throats for a long time. We believe in re-regulation. There's now a very controversial bit of legislation in the making, the legislative services package. We talked about it at length yesterday in our assembly, so I will not go through it again. But just to mention to those who weren't there yesterday that this is something which is very much on the cards. So the EU, under this vision of making life easier and everybody happy, wealthy, and prosperous, is trying to harmonize Europe more and more. And this has to be resisted. I mean, national boundaries exist, national characteristics exist, the legislation is different, and we need to find our foot in this. And I know the second field of debate will look at some of these problems that we face. We know that things will change. The 46 chambers represented here today will change. We need to be in the driving seat together with the EU legislators. And lastly, we have this globalization beast, a term which was much feared only a decade ago, and now is part of our daily life, and nobody even questions it. You can see in industry, things just aren't what they are called. Heineken beer, for example, owns Foster's. I mean, this is something of Foster's. You see surfers, Australians, sharks, and Afflingen, Belgium, Moretti, the Italian most famous beer, all belong to one global colossus with 125 breweries in 70 countries. Volvo, the stalwart of Scandinavian car making, is Chinese, actually. Fiat is half American. Alitalia is a disaster. It'll probably close down in the next few months. It has been given a 4-month breathing space. So what is the world coming to? Exactly, that is a question we are going to answer. We have invited speakers to present in the last session a global perspective. We have people. Roger Riva is a practitioner and a teacher from Graz, but he lives and works and travels around constantly. He's actually have a similar background to me, brought up in South Africa. He will give us his viewpoint. We have Tomohiko Yamanashi from Japan. We're honored to have people coming from a far away Japan, Macau, Islamabad, Pakistan. Mr. Jahangir Khan, president of Arcasia, has honored us with his presence. So I really appreciate the effort that has taken you to bring us here. And I met him in Hong Kong, and I was impressed by many things I heard there, which demolished some of my preconceptions. Production in Asia is beyond our wildest dreams in terms of volume of work accessible to them. But nevertheless, I've seen that responsibility and responsible architecture can go hand in hand with commercial success. And Mr. Yamanashi will actually show us, I hope he will certainly talk about it in his presentation. So it's not easy, but it's certainly possible. We need to learn from everyone. As I said before, we're all in this together. I look forward to leaving here this evening having learned something new and happily and confidently tuck into my spaghetti carbonara, which I know is eternal and will never change. I would like to end off by thanking our hosts, thanking the CNAPPC, thanking the President, Giuseppe Capoking, who unfortunately could not be here this morning, thanking the Chamber of Architects, who have the offices on the top floor, for hosting, for giving us the space, the EU program, cultural program funding, which has been given to us very generously, and thanking you, the public, and thanking the speakers, particularly those who have come from far away to give us their insight and to make this day a great one. Thank you again, and talk to you later.